So I gotta mute this so you don't hear me. That, and that should be it. Got it. Okay. I was just setting up the Zoom. Now I've got that set up. I'm gonna just mute it now in case you watch the video later on YouTube. If you need to, I'm just gonna mute it now. So as I'm going over people's names for attendance, no one can hear what I'm saying. I'm saying your name. I'm just gonna mute the microphone for a moment. Myself, just recap, I'm just going over some points. I uploaded the PowerPoint that I'm using today to Google Drive. The second point is I uploaded the videos to the class recordings, so you should be able to see those on Blackboard. And the third thing is, what was the third thing? Oh, maybe it's just the two things. Okay, yeah, I think it was just those two things, the PowerPoint and the videos on Blackboard. So take a look, please. Okay, I don't think there's anything else. Friend here. Okay, so today we're transitioning into the topic of the Catholic Church and other religions. Okay, we are at a Catholic institution, so I thought it would be helpful to briefly go over how the Catholic Church views not only itself as a religion, but how it looks out at other religions. Can't forget you, my little friend. Come here. And so we started out, hopefully, reading something, just some selections from the Bible. Can't read the whole thing. And who would want to? Well, anyway, some selections from the Holy Bible that deal with, that mention other religions and how at least the Jews, and in some cases, and of course Christians, were dealing with their relationship to people who did not believe what they believed. Of course, I should say that all of the early Christians, I mean, the whole New Testament is Jews. I mean, because it was written by Jews. The Christians were just Jews who believed that Jesus was the Christ, the Messiah, hence Christians. So actually, the Bible, both Old Testament and the New Testament, is a Jewish book. And what is the Bible? Very briefly, the Bible is actually it's a collection of writings. It's not just one writing solely, it's a collection of writings. Let me get to my PowerPoint before I forget to show it. There we are. It is a collection of writings that have been brought together. And this book that's come together with this collection of writings is the story, the record of God's relationship with these people we call the Jews. And that's just basically how I'm going to refer to them, the people of, you can also say the people of Israel, a lot of different words, Israelites, Hebrews, Judahites, there are all sorts of different words depending on which period of time you're talking about. But, you know, this isn't a course on Judaism, and we'll talk about that later when we talk about Judaism, but I'm not going to do it now. So I'm just going to use the basic term of the Jews, which I think people understand, this ethnic group, this group of people which have a common ancestor that unites them. They're also united by their religion, their belief in this, their special relationship with this God. The ancestor that unites them is actually a man. Talk about the Israelites or Israel. The word Israel is actually not the name of a country, it's the name of a man. Israel or Israel, or so I'm from New Jersey, so I say Israel. So his original name was Jacob, Yaakov. And apparently God changes his name to Israel. So he's known by both, Jacob and Israel. So when you talk about the Jews, as sometimes you say the people of Israel, they are the sons and daughters, the descendants of this man, Jacob, with whom God enters into a special relationship. You will be my people, and I will be your God. And so the Bible is the story of that relationship. God chooses the relationship, not the Jews. Okay, the Jews were just one group amongst the many groups of humanity. All right, there wasn't necessarily anything special about them. Why didn't God choose the Irish? I don't know. I'm Irish, we're pretty nice. We're not, you know, we're funny people. We have the gift of gab. People seem to like us, you know. Why didn't God choose us? Why didn't God choose the Chinese? The Chinese had great civilizations, many great civilizations. I don't know. But there is the belief that he chose them. He chooses to create this relationship with them. And so Israel, or the sons and daughters of Jacob, become special instruments of God's presence in the world. Israel will be God's chosen instrument through which he will save the world. He will bring the world into a relationship with him through these people. At least that's the belief. And that's kind of the belief that you're seeing if you read their sacred writings. and they're their sacred writings, so they can say what they want about their relationship with their God. You don't have to believe it, but they believe it. Now, if you look at the readings, you might notice that the Bible, the Bible doesn't present a full theology of religion, so the world religions. It doesn't go out to explain, well, why are there world religions? Why are people religious in the first place? The Bible just takes human religiosity, human religiousness at face value. It exists. It's there. And it doesn't condemn human religiosity. And it doesn't necessarily make a judgment on human religions per se. It's the Bible, you can see in the readings, there are very critical attitudes towards other religions and how they practice, like idol worship and stuff like that. Certainly the author of the letter of Jeremiah or the book of wisdom, as you might know from the reading, they are not down with the idol worship. They don't like it. Okay. But they don't condemn what it represents, which is this search, some kind of search in some way, in shadows and groping around for God. So the Bible just accepts the fact that human beings are religious. People worship many gods and spirits. That can be kind of confusing sometimes for people because they think, well, weren't the Jews monotheists? They believed in one God and stuff like that, but they do. The Bible mentions other gods as if they exist. Yeah, the Jews, they didn't explain it. They're just like, people believe in these other gods. They're not our God. They're not the one God. But people do worship these things. Men can sense, and you get this, the Jews. Yes, there they are. Well, a particular type of Jew. These are probably Hasidim, or they could be Orthodox Jews. Sometimes for me as an outsider, it's hard to tell. But you can see they have to dress a certain way. They dress like, people from maybe 18th century Lithuania in their dress. They're kind of like the version for Christianity. You've probably heard of the Amish. If you're in Pennsylvania, you might have actually seen some Amish. These are Christians and they dress like they're from the 1600s still, Well, it happens in a lot of religions that people do stuff like this. And here you have Jews who believe that, as part of their religious practice, they want to dress like people did in Lithuania or Poland back in like the 16s and 1700s, wearing all black, coats and instead of big hats and stuff like that. Anyways, so there they are, at least modern day descendants of Jacob, Israel. So men and women sense God's existence. How? Well, if you read the catechism reading, you might know a couple of ways because these are mentioned. But you also see this idea or these ideas mentioned, for example, by the author of the Book of Wisdom. Beauty, power, okay? Human beings can sense there's something beautiful about the world. They sense that there's something powerful about the world. And so I have a picture there that I thought was beautiful. Maybe you don't think it's beautiful, but I think, maybe a lot of people would agree that this nice, placid, serene lake with beautiful fall trees and various colors and mountains and stuff like that. It could have been an ocean. Some people like the water and like to be by the ocean, and they like to see that, the great immensity of the ocean and the sand and the heat and stuff and hot weather. Okay, fine, hot, humid weather. But also power. So people sense beauty, they sense power. And from those things, God's existence is kind of sensed, is felt. There is a source of these things. I'm not the source of beauty. I didn't make those trees in the mountain in the back. I didn't make this image. Does anyone know what that image is of? Ooh, very powerful image. And no, it's not Sauron. For any of you Lord of the Rings fans, one could say it's the eye of God, if God were a Cyclops. What is that? Does anyone know? Very powerful thing. Da, 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 dee. Well, it's one of the most powerful things that exists. What's one of the most powerful things that exists in the whole universe? And don't say the god Thor, okay? Yes, sir. Mr. Don't tell me Stolzilgi.
Correct.
Yes. Zachary?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Then a picture of a black hole.
It is, sir. It is, sir. The first ever picture of a black hole from a galaxy far, far away. Literally a galaxy far, far away. Messier 87, I believe it is. I looked it up. I looked it up before when I got the picture on my computer, but some dude named Messier, interestingly enough, because when I was looking it up, back in like the late 1700s, I think it was 1781, that this dude Messier, French guy, saw it, I'm presuming with a telescope. He didn't know what it was. He didn't see the black hole. I mean, the black hole is at the center of a galaxy. He saw the galaxy. He thought it was something else, but he actually did discover the galaxy. And through various imaging and stuff like that, astronomers were able to kind of like pull away different other information and data and get to the data that represented the black hole. Okay, kind of spinning. You can kind of see that. This is the remnants of electromagnetism and stuff like that. Yes, a black hole, the most powerful thing in the universe. So beauty, power. Human beings sense these things. They also sense order. I should throw order in the universe there. Because even though, for example, if you look at that picture of the trees and the mountains, there is order going on. It's not complete chaos. I mean, the trees are growing in a certain way. Okay. Remember, a bunch of people here, I think, are in the medical sciences. They're going into the medical sciences. So you've taken biology. I think if I remember correctly, it's called heliotropism. Is it heliotropism? What is it called when plants naturally curve? No matter how you plant a plant, it will direct itself towards sunlight. Is that heliotropism? Doesn't sound right to me. Does it sound right to you? No biology majors? No, well, I mean, because I know you got to take like biology with lab. Yes, miss.
I think it's phototropism.
Phototropism. Oh, good. Yes, good. Phototropism. So the trees don't go down, do that. The roots go down, of course, but the trees are all going up. And they're not going in different directions. It's not like one tree is like going like this, another tree is going like that. No, they're all directed up towards sunlight. They're also changing colors. That's not chaotic. There's a reason for that. There's something going on in the chlorophyll, within the leaves, within the structure. I mean, it's not like every September and October, all the trees in like the Northern Hemisphere decide, but I'm going red this year. The same thing with a black hole. Extremely powerful, but orderly as well. That's why we can study them. That's why astronomers and astrophysicists can look at that and say, that's a black hole. Why? Because it's ordered. It fits all the patterns of what you would expect. It's following the rules for what a black hole should do. So we see these things, but unlike, say, the natural sciences, human beings search for the source. Natural science might say, well, that's a black hole and fine, we're done with it. We found it, we might study it, but we're not going to go beyond it. But human beings always seem to want to go beyond. We want to look for the source of those things, for beauty, for order, for power in the universe that we're in. And as it says in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, in the reading, if you're curious, it's number 2566, from the human religions are the concrete demonstrations of this search. Human religions are the concrete demonstrations of humanity's search for the source of beauty, power, order. Usually ending up with a god of some sort, or some sort of being or force that is transcendent over all things. It gives beauty, power, and order to the created world. Where does it all go wrong? I mean, in the Book of Wisdom, in the couple of chapters or a few chapters that you read, it talks about this, how God can be seen from the beauty of creation, from the created world. In the letter to the Romans, this man, St. Paul, or Paul, I should say, talks about, it was just chapter 1 I had you read, I believe, or portion, talks about how, yes, through the use of natural reason, people could see from natural realities, they could possibly reason to the existence of a God, but they didn't necessarily, or they reasoned to God in the wrong way. Where does it all go wrong? For, say, the biblical writers, it goes wrong because humans oftentimes seem to mistake the natural realities for supernatural realities, for the natural source. They see the beautiful mountain, and they don't seem to go further and extrapolate that there is a beautiful creator of that mountain. A lot of times it seems in human religions, it stops right at the mountain. The mountain is beautiful, therefore the mountain becomes like some kind of spiritual entity, a god in a way. You might worship the mountain, or you might consider it sacred, and so you can't go there. You stay away from the mountain. No one's allowed on the mountain. Why? Because it's God, it's like a god, so you don't go there. Or in some cases, you do go there. In some religions, yes, let's all go to the mountain. Let's all go to the mountain and see the God of the mountain. And maybe sacrifice a few virgins along the way. Good times. No? Why is it always the virgins that get it? I don't know. So that's where they see the problem, the biblical authors. They don't realize the God that lies behind these things, that people divinize them, or they make God into men and women, so the gods are like humans. Worse than that, because I'm sorry, I got to take this down for a second. I can't breathe. Worse than just mistaking the natural realities for, say, supernatural transcendent ones, is that people make physical objects. They make them themselves. It's not just looking at the natural world and being impressed by it, saying, oh, wow, maybe that's a god, Humans themselves make objects and then say, oh, this is the god. Let's worship it. So for the biblical authors, that's even worse. That human beings make physical objects to which they then place godhood on them. Why? Why is this worse? Because in the first case, people are worshiping things they did not, they are, that they know who made them. They know they were made by a person. They know someone carved the wood. It didn't carve itself. They know that someone carved the stone. It didn't carve itself. And then someone placed gold or silver or other precious metals on the wood, or painted it, or did something. So you know these things. The god, the idol didn't just show up in the temple all by itself. Someone made it, crafted it, and then it was put there by other human beings. Think of the letter of Jeremiah, the reading from Baruch chapter 6. The gods can't even walk. They're supposedly gods, but other people have to pick them up and carry them to their own house and put them in there. Of course, these things are not gods, according to the letter of Jeremiah. Why would you think they are? So in the first instance, say nature, we might call this nature worship. People are worshiping things that they didn't make, but are more powerful than they are. It's the storm. A lot of religions have gods of the storm, okay, because storms are powerful, okay. Their thunder is loud, lightning is impressive and can kill people as well, hurt people. So the sea, the ocean is massive, so, and it scares people. If you ever sailed out into the middle of the ocean, you're just surrounded by ocean, it can be really scary. You can't see down, you can't see what's underneath you. If you get into a storm, it's very dangerous. So of course, it kind of makes, it's not a great leap to assume that people might worship these realities. But idolatry, as I said, is much worse because people know that this God was made by someone else. And the question you might ask is, why not just worship the idol maker? Why are you worshiping the idol? You know, worship Bob, who made the idol for your temple. You know, he's the creator of the God. Worship him. Give him all your money. Well, not, you know, a voluntary offering. Yes. Give him all your voluntary offerings. Don't leave them at the temple, at the foot of the god or the goddess, because you know that Bob made them both, you know? The god obviously owes its existence to another human being who made it. Mention the Book of Wisdom. The Book of Wisdom, just to give you some background, I'm not going to go too deep. There are two writings that I want to emphasize. The first one from the second book of Kings with Naaman the Syrian, and the other one from the Acts of the Apostles dealing with this man Paul. So the other readings, I'm assuming you've read them, so you have some understanding when I mention them. But I'm not going to go too deeply into them. In fact, I've kind of already mentioned the main points of here, the Book of Wisdom, and the reading from the Book of Baruch. The Book of Wisdom, I just give you a little bit of information there. It's said to be written by King Solomon. It's said to be written by a man named King Solomon, who was a Jewish king who reigned around the 900s BC, hence the 10th century before Christ, but probably not. It probably wasn't, you know, it was like when someone sets up, you know, a Twitter account, you know, hashtag the real Donald Trump, you know. Like, you got to tell people, you know, it's like, I'm the real one, because someone can set up anything and put a $sign Matthew Dunn, you know, and then start putting out tweets, and I got to be like, hey, I didn't write that. My account was hacked. So you have to be careful. And people did this in the ancient world as well. You wanted to get people's attention and get them to read your writing. Okay, you might claim that someone more famous than you wrote it. I mean, you're not lying, but you're kind of trying to give honor to, say, someone who came before you who was a great person. And so it gives honor to your writing. So we don't know who wrote the Book of Wisdom, but it was apparently at least written in Greek, not in Hebrew. It was written in Greek around 50 BC. And you can see the definition there of what kind of genre it is. A protreptic is basically a persuasive writing that is trying to get people to, I'm going to pass by that, I'm trying to get people to accept the author's point of view. One of the messages of the Book of Wisdom is that idol worship is stupid. Okay, he doesn't put, I'm assuming it was a he doesn't place too fine a point on it. Okay, he's like, idol worship makes no sense. You know, you look at the created world, you know that it came from somewhere. Why aren't you searching for the source of where it came from? Why, whatever that is, why are you just stopping at the images? Why aren't you going to the source of the images? The Book of Baruch reading actually is not Baruch. If you look in your Bibles, it tells you this, but they don't tell it to you really clearly. But it's not always very clearly indicated in Bibles. It actually should be set apart as a separate book. But if you look here, chapter 6, it'll say the letter of, God bless you, the letter of Jeremiah. It's actually a separate writing called the letter of Jeremiah, but it gets stuck onto the end of the Book of Baruch. So there you go, Baruch chapter 6. again, we don't, it says it was written by, it's a letter written by the prophet Jeremiah. You can see its dates there, 645 to 5, sometime after 587 BC. But again, probably not. It's probably someone who's writing kind of using, again, the prestige of the prophet Jeremiah to give, kind of bulk up the message of their letter, the message they're trying to convey, to show the importance of their message. And so the letter of Jeremiah was probably written around 300 BC. Just write this here on the board so you know. So yes, Baruch chapter 6 is actually a separate writing that's been combined to the book of Baruch, but it's actually a separate writing called the letter of Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah. Now, I mean, the letter of Jeremiah has basically the same message as the book of wisdom, that idol worship is silly and human beings shouldn't do it. But the letter of Jeremiah, the author's way of going about it is more satire, making fun of it and exposing its foolishness. How? Well, the book of wisdom tends to be more philosophical, tries to reason and say, look, it's more reasonable to worship the source of the creation rather than the creation, which was made by that source. The book of Baruch is more kind of down to earth and commonsensical in the sense that he's just like, well, look at what they do. As I told you before, you know who made the God. You know, you could see it being crafted. You know, you guys in his woodworking shop, hey, Bob, you got Ashtar or Ishtar finished today? Oh, I'll have Ishtar finished by next week. Then we can have a big party and we'll put flowers on her and carry her over to the temple and put her in and burn incense to her. Okay, Bob, great. Yeah. So you know where it's coming from. The god or goddess can't even get to the temple itself. When they install the god or the goddess, look at what happens. They have to feed it. They have to give it clothing, like it's cold or something. They have to put it to sleep and wake it up in the morning and put it to sleep at night. And Baruch and the author of the letter of Jeremiah is like, well, what kind of God is that? You know, even cats have no respect. You know, that's actually, interestingly enough, the only mention of cats that you'll find in the Bible is in the letter of Jeremiah. But then again, that's not much of an argument for me because cats don't respect anybody. So, even even if there were cats in like Nazareth, I could imagine even Jesus being like, get out of here. The cat's just like looking like, you ain't got kibble, I ain't coming, Jesus. Son of God or no son of God, no kibble, no come. You know? Yes, I gotta make my own fun. What is an idol? An idol, very simply, is any physical object that's used as an object of worship. Okay, I've been mentioning this word idol a lot, or several times. And so here's just a little definition. It comes from the Greek eidolon, which means an image, simply an image, a likeness, a phantom, yes, but an image, a likeness, like a likeness that's made, like a statue. But it could also be an image in the sense of maybe a painting, like a painted image, okay? But usually eidolon seems to refer to physical images, statues and statuary and stuff like that. The word, if you go further back on the word, it's rooted in this word eidos, which simply means a form or a shape, any kind of figure or form, okay? So a figure that is created for the purposes of humans to worship it, to bring them into contact with that ultimate reality they believe in. Now, the reading from the second book of Kings. There are two books of Kings, the first book and the second book. at least in the Roman Catholic version of the Bible, if you're Eastern Catholic like me, actually, they're actually 4 books of Kings. They're called, but in Catholic Bibles, they call the first 2 the first book of Samuel, this prophet and champion named Samuel, and the second book of Samuel. Then you've got the first book of Kings and the second book of Kings. In Eastern Christianity, they call all those books the books of Kings. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So I'm coming at this from a kind of a Latin Christianity, Roman Catholic perspective, but that's okay. So the second book of Kings, just very briefly, what are the books of Kings about? Well, just from the title, you can tell kings, rulers, the rulers of Israel. Okay, when the Jews finally did have their own kingdom, their own monarchy, they had rulers. And so the books of, well, actually the first 2 books, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and then 1st Kings and 2nd Kings, they all are telling these stories. 1st and 2nd Samuel are concerned of where did the Jews get their kingdom from and who was their first king, tells that story, which leads into the story of King David, the famous King David, the great king of the Jews, David. And then the books of Kings 1 and 2 continue on with who were the successors of David in the Jews' kingdom. So the reading we had from the second book of Kings tells us the story of this prophet named Elisha. Now, there are different ways to pronounce his name. I grew up saying Elisha, but other people will say Elisha or Elisha, okay? Why? Because there's another prophet before him called Elijah, and sometimes I think people think it can sound too close one to the other. So I'll say Elisha, actually, just so there's no confusion with this previous prophet called Elijah, all right? This man Elisha is a prophet of God. When did he live? Sometime around the 800s and the 700s BC, so the 9th or 6th century BC. Where did he live? He lived in a place called Samaria, actually, well, I won't get into that because this might be confusing. Well, I put it on the PowerPoint, so now I have to. Anyways, the kingdom of Israel, which is also called Samaria. Okay, so Elisha was a prophet from the kingdom of Israel, which also is called Samaria. Here's a little map for you, just to give you an idea. In the beginning, under the early kings like David, there was a unified kingdom. Okay, there was a unified kingdom. A little bit. And okay, turn the camera just so people can see the PowerPoint and see what I'm actually doing, even though you can't really see it great with this camera here. Well, that's because I minimized this. Here we go. There we go. Okay. This, you see the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel were the original one kingdom. And they're surrounded by other kingdoms and places, okay? But this kingdom of Israel and kingdom of Judah were one kingdom until there was a split, okay? There was the northern groups of Jews felt that they were not being treated fairly by the southern groups of Jews, and so they split and found and installed someone as their own new king, and they called their kingdom the kingdom of Israel. So it gets a little confusing. And the southern portion of the one kingdom of Israel decided to start calling it, or at least we call it, the kingdom of Judah. And the capital was in Jerusalem. But for the kingdom of Israel, they established a new capital in Samaria. Hence, it's also called Samaria, just to distinguish it from Judah. This is where the word Jew comes from. The modern day Jews are actually descendants of the kingdom of Judah, not of Israel, because eventually Israel was destroyed. It was invaded and destroyed, and all the people who lived there were dispersed. They were sent into exile, and who knows where they are today. Can't find them, not even genetically. So the modern day Jews trace their origins from the southern kingdom of Judah. Judahites, they were called. Hence, it becomes Jew. Okay. So Elisha was a prophet in this region, in the kingdom of Israel, Samaria. Turn this back around. And what does, oh, did I actually give a, I guess I didn't do that. I thought I gave a definition of what a prophet is. Apparently not. That's fine. I have it here, so I'll give it to you now. What does it mean to say that he was a prophet? A prophet simply means that he was someone who spoke for God, basically. You speak for some spiritual being. That's usually what a prophet is. And prophets were not unique to Israel or to the Jews. You find this idea of people who speak for the gods or speak for spirits throughout many human religions. Okay? But he spoke for the God of Israel. Let me write this down because I'm going to put it on the PowerPoint. Prophet. The name for someone who makes known a message or vision of God. Name of someone who makes known vision or message of God. Vision or message. So he's there. The guy, other character in the story, Naaman, comes from the kingdom of Aram. They say Aram, Damascus, but that green region up there. Aram is an ancient term for the country, modern country of Syria. The country of Syria. So when you're reading the Bible and it mentions Aram, it's referring to that region up in the green, or kind of greenish. And Naaman comes to see Elisha because he has a problem. He has a skin disease. It's called leprosy. It could have been actual leprosy. But, you know, anyway, he had some sort of, leprosy was usually a catch-all term for any type of skin disease, a severe skin disease. And it, you know, made you kind of an outcast. You know, people didn't want you touching stuff because, you know, they were worried about germs, even though they didn't know really about germs all the way back then. But they just thought, you know, you were kind of disgusting and they didn't want you touching things because you might make them unclean. You might pass on your leprosy to other people. And so he's in a bind and he hears about this holy man down in Samaria who can maybe help him. And so he goes to see Elisha. Why? Because his God can't help him. We find out later in the story that the god of that region was a god whose name is Rimmon or Rimmon, also known as Baal Hadad. Hadad. Here, put it up here. Okay. Gods could go by many names. So Ramon, I guess we'll say Ramon, but also known as Baal Hadad, was by that name as well. And by whatever name his God goes, his God was not helping him, was not curing his leprosy. So he's desperate and he goes to Elisha down in the kingdom of Israel to see him. Now, it was not uncommon, or it was not a common view that, people viewed, first of all, well, I guess the first point to make is you should not be surprised that the ancient Jews believed that there were the existence of other gods. Okay, there had to be some kind of development in their mindset. They knew they had their God of their region, but other regions of the world, other areas also worship their own gods. And the gods were very territorial. So Ramon is the god of the area in Aram, where Naaman is from. But the Israelite God is the God apparently of the Jews in their area. And different other regions like Edom and Moab would have their local deities as well that they would worship. And each local god kind of is like like the states. Each state is kind of sovereign within its own boundaries. So each god kind of did what it did within its own boundary or region, and was not, the power didn't really extend beyond that. But apparently Ramon has no power in his region because Naaman cannot be cured of his leprosy. So he goes to this other god because of his desperation. There are some interesting points in the story, the way the Jews tell it, because what I just told you about gods being regional, each god kind of being tied to its area of the planet, where it is, where its people is. This does not seem to be the case with the God of Israel. He's not bound to a particular region. How do we know this? Because Naaman is not one of his. He's not from the kingdom of Israel. He's not from the kingdom of Judah. He's not a Jew. Nevertheless, the God of Israel can heal him. Whereas Naaman's own God can't, apparently, or won't. The Israelite God can heal anybody, can do anything. He's not necessarily bound to his own place. He's a God of all places. And so by extension, everything belongs to him, even Aram. Even Aram. He can take over the role of the God of Aram, who cannot heal Naaman. He can do it. So kind of like this little message that's being sent is that in the story is that the God of Israel is not bound to any particular region, not really bound to any particular region as human beings think about their gods, because he can heal anyone from anywhere. And if God is not really bound to any place, then everything belongs to him. And by extension, he is everywhere. Start seeing this development of the guy. He's not just some desert god, the god of the Judean desert or the some Middle Eastern deity. No, he's the God of everywhere because he can act in all places. He's not necessarily bound to Israel, although that's where he chooses to reside with his people. And the Israelite God doesn't act the same way as Naaman expects gods to act. Naaman expects magic. When Naaman shows up to Elisha, he's kind of annoyed with Elisha. He's angry because Elisha, says, this is what my God has told me, go wash in the Jordan River and you'll be healed. You'll be made clean. And Elisha's like, what? The guy's not going to do anything? He's not. I thought he was going to come out and wave his hand over the spot and it would be clean, magic. That's how he thinks from his relationship with Ramon, that, you force the God, you do something, you say certain words or you use certain tools. And by doing that, you will force the God. You'll have control over the God or the spirit and make it do what you want. In this case, heal him from his leprosy. But as we read in the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the reading from there, it talks about magic and talks about how magic is actually a perversion of religion, this right relationship, because it's kind of like an abuse of power. I'm trying to force something to do what I want. I'm forcing my will, which is not necessarily a good thing. So it's magic is seen from a Christian point of view, from a Catholic point of view, as a perversion of religion. A human being is trying to control God so that God will do what I want him to do for me. And Naaman is surprised that Elisha doesn't do that, that the God of the Jews doesn't do that. He doesn't resort to magic to heal him. He doesn't come out and just say, okay, blah, 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 abracadabra, bibbidi bobbidi boo, boom, leprosy's gone. The God of Israel doesn't do that, and that surprises him. Even makes him mad, because that was his experience of religion. But that wasn't the Jewish experience. The Jewish God is not under anyone's control. Naaman thinks that, the Jewish God is not under anyone's control. The God of Israel does not need magic. He is not controlled by anything. Instead, in the story, God tells Naaman, go wash. He gives him commands. Do what I tell you to do and you'll be okay. You don't need magic with me. So Naaman's God, could not save, but Israel's God could. And here we get I'm going to backtrack to the previous slide, because if you might have noticed, or will notice now, if you look at what Elisha's name means in Hebrew, it's Elisha, but it can also be pronounced Eliasha. And scholars think that the root meaning in Hebrew is God has saved. God has saved. And when you read the Bible, because we're reading it in English translation, and I don't read Hebrew, at least certainly not very well, terribly actually. But if you could read the Hebrew, the Jews love all sorts of word plays, especially with names, but not just names. The words that are used in Hebrew kind of play off of other words in the story and other motifs that are being talked about. And so it's probably not for nothing. It's not a coincidence that here Naaman, who cannot be saved from leprosy by his own God, Rimmon, has to come to Elisha, the man of God, whose name means literally, God has saved you. Even the name of the prophet shows where salvation lies. It does not lie in the gods of the nations, but in the God of the Jews. Now, what's the upshot? Naaman is cured once he does what the God of the Jews tells him to do. And what does he do? He doesn't just leave. He goes back to Elisha and says, you know what? I want some dirt from your region. Notice he wants the very dirt of the region of this God, because he wants to cart it back with him to Aram so that he can use that dirt from Israel, not from his, to build a special altar to the God of the Jews. And he's like, that's the only God I'm going to worship from now on, because I know that there is a God, there's no other God except in Israel. Which is a mind-blowing statement if you think about it, for someone like a man like Naaman to say. Why is this such a revolutionary thing? This was unheard of. You worship the God of your region, of your country, of your family. That was the way of things. But now Naaman will only worship Israel's God. And then he has the further realization that the other gods of the world are nothing, really. There's just this one God of Israel. There is no God except in Israel. And this is leading towards monotheism. This might be a later insight that when the person was writing it down, they inserted this. You never know, but because of course you have to remember it's a Jew who's writing the story. So you're getting that side of the story. You're not getting an unbiased view, okay? So of course, there is no God but our God. So there's a little bit of chest thumping going on there in propaganda. There is no God like our God. But that's the message. Okay, that's what the story is trying to point out. There is only one God. Raman is nothing. Baal Hadad is nothing. Ishtar is nothing. Asherah is nothing. The gods of the nations, Chemosh, all the other gods that are mentioned in the Bible. These gods are nothing. There is only one God. And only he can save. And how does he save? He saves through Israel. See, even people from foreign nations are coming to us to find out that we have prophets and we have a God. So what's a takeaway, or something that I took away from the story? I think that, from a theological perspective, I would say that God meets people where they are and what they can know. What they can know, through the use of their own human reason or the state of their life. Okay? A little child cannot know as much as an adult. An adult who has, say, a mental defect cannot know as someone whose brain is sound. Okay, so God knows the tools he's dealing with. Okay, Naaman does not become a Jew. He doesn't convert to Judaism. He says he's going to only worship the God of the Jews, but he doesn't get circumcised. He doesn't start eating kosher. He's like, he doesn't convert to Judaism, and that idea might not have even made sense to him. Okay, of conversion to another religion. Okay, he just realized for himself where the truth was, and he tries to follow it as best he can. It's not always perfect. Like he admits to Elisha that, I'm a counselor to my king, and he worships Raman, and when he goes for the sacrifice, I have to be there. So, and I have to act like Raman is real, even though I don't believe in Raman anymore. So please forgive your servant. And what does Elisha say? Anybody remember? Oh. He says, go in peace. As a side note, and quite interestingly, Jesus, the Jew, mentions this incident. It's the only place where Elisha, the prophet Elisha, is mentioned in the New Testament. Not that I guess he should be, but it's just, a little bit of trivia there. If anyone tries to say, where's the prophet Elisha mentioned in the New Testament? The Gospel of Luke, chapter 4, verse 27. Jesus goes to the synagogue on the Sabbath, as was his habit, and he gets up to do a reading, and he starts talking about himself and his mission. Sorry, just trying to get this. He's talking about himself and his mission, and the people there are like, again, they're kind of like looking for miracles. They're looking for magic, Jesus, do the stuff that you did in Capernaum, do that stuff with the bread again and the fish. Feed the whole town with just a piece of bread. Come on, Jesus, raise a few dead people. Show it. Because they didn't believe in him. They thought Jesus was like a wonder worker, a magician. And Jesus not going to do it. Instead, Jesus responds, and he uses the example of Elisha. He says, look, there were lepers in Israel at the time of Elisha. There were people who had skin diseases, but none of them did Elisha go to heal. Instead, this foreigner comes down, this outsider. He alone Elisha healed. Well, his fellow Jews didn't want to hear that one. And Jesus pissed them off. Some of them wanted to kill him. They thought that was a grave insult. But that's where Jesus mentions Elisha. Jesus applies the prophet Elisha, his example, to himself. He is a messenger of God. And he has come for the Jews, yes, but you also kind of have that little hint that I'm here for more than just you. I'm not here just for a particular ethnic group, even though Jesus is a Jew and he's the Messiah of the Jews, but I'm here for all people, even outsiders. People should read the gospel. Well, we'll read some of the gospels when we get to Christianity. You'll read the Gospel of Mark. Read it, because people don't know Jesus. People think they know Jesus. People think they like Jesus. If they actually read the Gospels, Jesus was not always likable. Jesus didn't always tell people nice stuff. Jesus spoke a lot about punishment and hell, believe it or not. And this was a case where the crowd did not want to hear what he had to say. Not all the stories end with people rejoicing. Oh, hallelujah, Jesus, you're wonderful. Except he ended up on a cross, killed. I don't know how that ends up with someone who everyone loves. Might be more to the story. Now, our buddy Paul. Well, let's see what happens with Paul. From Acts of the Apostles, there are a couple of readings in Acts of the Apostles. Romans, I mentioned before. I'm not going to talk Romans. I'm just I wanted to point some things out about that. This man, Paul, who was a Jew, he was a rabbi, so he was trained in his religion. He was actually an opponent of Christianity early on. He opposed it. He didn't like this movement, this Jesus movement that was occurring in Judaism. But eventually he did change his mind and became a Christian and became a great preacher, going around preaching, talking to his fellow Jews about Jesus and also talking even to non-Jews about Jesus. This man, Paul, we believe he died around the year 65. That's a rough estimate. It's probably accurate because after the period of 65, we don't seem to get any more references to him. There are no letters from him. We have a whole bunch of his letters and stuff that he wrote, but there seems to be historical agreement that this man Paul died around 65 AD. And then later on, this man named Luke wrote about Paul in his book, The Acts of the Apostles, which is kind of a little history. I mean, it's history, but it's not history, okay? Luke is an historian. He likes to give historical details, but really he's trying to paint a picture. In Acts of the Apostles, he's painting a picture of the early Christian community, of what the early church looked like, or more importantly, what he thought it should have looked like, or should look like, I should say. So Luke incorporates history, but he also incorporates some things of his own creation, whatever. The scholars pick apart to see, well, what's historical and what's just Luke making a point. But he writes a lot about Paul in Acts of the Apostles. And in the first reading, where Paul and Barnabas, this man Barnabas, go to Lystra, this other man, Barnabas, who was actually kind of Paul's mentor at first. He kind of brought Paul into the faith, but then Paul supersedes him. Paul supersedes him. Anyways, Paul and Barnabas go to this city of Lystra, and here's a picture of it that I got. This is the ancient city. I mean, the city's not there anymore. They have ruins, some ruins. I don't think any archaeologist has dug it up yet, but there are some ruins and stuff like that. But this hill, or this mound, is where archaeologists or people believe, scholars believe, that the ancient city of Lystra that Paul visited was located. And they're probably right, because I said there's stuff there, you know. I think there's even something they found that mentions the city being there. So they're just preaching there, and in the midst of preaching, Paul has this sense that one of the people in the crowd has faith and can be healed. I guess he was a cripple. He couldn't walk, lame. And so Paul heals him. And the people go crazy. You know, they're, the gods have visited us, because they're not Jews. They're non-Jews, you know, so they believe in all these gods and spirits, and they think that this power can only come from the gods. And so if Paul, with a word, can heal this crippled man, he must be one of the gods. Now, which god is he? Well, they think that Paul is probably the god Mercury. I don't know if I put this on the PowerPoint, but anyways, I'll get to that picture in a minute. They think that Paul is probably the god Mercury. Why? Well, because in their mythology, this god Mercury or Hermes, I should say Hermes. That's what it says in the Bible passage, the Greek Hermes. Hermes is the god, the messenger god. He's the one who takes the messages of the gods and takes them to human beings. Okay, so he's like the UPS man for the gods. All right. Zeus is the king of the gods. He's the ruler. Doesn't mean he was the first god or the only god. No, because he had a father. Because he didn't kill his father, but did he kill his father or did he just stick him down into the lowest region of hell? Something like that. But anyways, nevertheless, I think you never could really get rid of gods. They're like vampires. They never really die. But anyways, but no, he had a father and he had brothers and sisters. So, but he was still the most powerful of them. So they made him the king, the ruler of all the gods. So the crowd goes crazy. They think, Barnabas must be Zeus because he just is there and he's doesn't say anything, but he seems to be running the whole show. Remember, Barnabas was kind of like the mentor to Paul. Paul's the one doing all the speaking, so he must be Hermes, the messenger. So they're like, oh, the gods have come to us in like human form, so let's hold a party, let's worship them. And this, of course, this drives Paul crazy because this is a complete opposite of what he's there for. He's not there to be worshiped. He's there to bring them to the worship of the God he believes in. What's on this PowerPoint here is actually our earliest representation of the Apostle Paul. It comes from the 300s AD. So, I mean, it's a picture. It's probably not actually how he looked, but it's a stereotypical picture of an image, one might say, an eidos. Actually, more appropriate would be ikonos, an icon, for a picture. A stereotypical image of what Paul looked like. It's kind of like in comic books, you have to draw Spider-Man a certain way, otherwise you don't know if it's Spider-Man. I mean, if you draw Spider-Man in a suit with a big S on his chest, wearing like red tights and blue underwear and stuff like that. I think it's that, right? It's red with blue and a big cape. Spidey doesn't wear no cape. That's Superman. It's not Spider-Man. So in the same kind of way, you want to know that this, for sure, this is a picture of Paul. So he's got the big pointy beard. He's bald on top. Okay. His hair is still, I guess he's using hair dye because he's still got nice hair. If this were St. Peter, it would be different. St. Peter is usually gray hair. He's got a short curly beard and short curly hair. He's not bald. Okay. So this is clearly an image of St. Paul from the 300s, the 4th century. It's just an artistic representation. Okay. And it's the earliest image we found of a Christian image we found of this man. Okay, so I'll finish the rest on Tuesday. Have a good weekend. God bless you all. Okay. Oh, man. These masks. Can't breathe. Ah, man. I'll turn everything off in a moment and just, leave it on for a few minutes. Just waving at my computer, which is my backup. Actually, I'll turn that off right now. Okay. You too. Thank you, Miss. Okay, I want to save the copy. Yes, I do. What did I do? Where do I want to save the copy? I want to save it. There. Nope. Okay. All right, so everybody's gone, so I'm going to end this recording. I never did the live transcript. I apologize. I forgot. Well, you know what? I'm just not gonna wear it. I'll wear the paper one. So it's just not gonna happen. Just can't breathe. I can't function with it on. It's killing my nose. Okay. Oh, that's much better. Not ideal, but it's better. Hello.
Hello. Look at this, look at this. Oh, yeah. I actually really like these spinny chairs. It's like,
Yeah, that makes me, I got, but that's because I cut this out and,
I'm in the other room. Yeah, like the. I don't know. When you were in there, what did you ultimate trip? Yeah, and sometimes they do the ones that you know, you played Ultimate Frisbee? You ever played Ultimate Frisbee? Oh, yeah. I thought it said tomorrow. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. Just